and welcome to another episode of our studying of the Guide for the Noahide. Here you go, Guide for Noahide. My name is Abby, and this video study is our new project for being Noahide. But before we get into our study, I want to introduce my on-screen co-hosts. We have Andrew Overall.
Evening.
Jacob Scharf.
Hello.
And we normally have Shane with us, but he's traveling with his family, so hopefully he'll be able to join us next time. And before we jump into our study here, just to kind of give you a recap of how we operate. So the project is we're planning to read and study the entire book front to back of Guide for the Noahide. It's written by Rabbi Michael Baron, who we fondly refer to as our Mori. If you get a copy of the book on lightcatcherbooks.com or on Amazon. And our plan is to read the book paragraph by paragraph, and in between paragraphs we'll stop and discuss important points in the paragraph. And the purpose, of course, is to educate ourselves about the halakha for Noahide, because as Rabbi Baron says in the back of his book, he says that at the last line, it says, the very foundation of any relationship with the true God is knowing and fulfilling all the precepts that he commanded us as Jews and Noahides. Piety cannot replace and indeed cannot be reached without this solid foundation. So, with that, do we want to recap what we said last week, or do we want to just jump right into studying? I guess we can always view the videos, the past video, if you want to see what happened.
Well, one thing to add here, our style of reading here, if it was not mentioned before in the other video, that this is really inspired largely by the Chavruta method that Jews have always practiced for ages, where normally two students will read Torah or any Torah literature, and they go back and forth. Because in their tradition, that is how Torah is truly learned. Not just simply reading silently to oneself, or even just reading aloud, but reading with another study partner, and then what comes between them in the conversation with the help of Hashem. And so that is the format that we tried to, with Hashem's help, to produce here. And hopefully people will be inspired to do the same.
Yeah, and in fact, when we post these videos, people, anybody watching it can feel free to post comments in the video comments section, and we'll collect them and have discussion offline. So, in fact, I would recommend people, if you have a notebook, just take notes as you go along, and at the end, just post them on the comment section, and we'll discuss there. So tonight we're going to continue reading the preface of the book. We're hopefully going to be able to get through it in this session, and our reader tonight is going to be Jacob Scharf. And do you have any words to say before we start, Jacob? Or
I think since what we're about to read begins with the word however, I think a quick recap of where we were leaving off, like what he's saying, however, to, might be in order. So the basic thought that led up to this, however, was that in recent times, a number of excellent steps forward have been made in works making the halakha of the 7 laws more accessible to people. And among those excellent works that have come out recently is one called
Divine Code.
The Divine Code. I had to look at my bookshelf to see what it was called. Written by Rabbi Moshe Weiner. And Mori brings forth that the general method of the book is that the rabbi is bringing forth the halakha for B'nai Noach from the Mishnah Torah. And that's how and then he goes into explain a little bit about why the Mishnah Torah is a good source for him to be bringing this forth. So, and then that leads into this next paragraph.
Okay.
And finally, to add the whole point of this section here, is ultimately to explain why it is best to study our laws according to Mishnah Torah, which we will find as we go on, as we went through last week, the history of a brief history of the oral law and how it has developed in the face of the changing times when we come to today.
Indeed. Okay. So that being said, let's jump back into the text, which is, if you're reading in the paper version,
It's on page IV. Roman numeral 4.
Yes. Roman numeral IV. Okay. So it says, however, while Rabbi Weiner's groundbreaking work is very much based in Rambam's Mishnah Torah and presents the Noahide laws in a digestible format, it is not fully comprehensive. Moreover, rather than presenting the laws simply as they were codified and then restated in Mishnah Torah, the Noahide laws are interpreted in the broader context of Talmudic and post-Talmudic literature, a rabbinical style that is widespread in our times. Rambam intended his legal code to be understood as a system unto itself. In his epistle to his favorite student, Rav Yosef ben Yehuda, he wrote, and I'm going to just jump ahead into this quote rather than us pausing to discuss here.
Hold on, sorry.
Immediate thoughts.
Sorry. No, not really. Well, I think, well, no, I think read it and then we can discuss.
Okay. I have already warned you not to become lax until you know the entire composition, the Mishnah Torah, and that it should become your book, and you should learn it everywhere you go, in order that you may attain its maximum benefit. For the intended purpose of what was written in the Talmud and the books like it is already finished and complete. And the purpose of learning Talmud is a waste of time in the Talmud's back and forth argumentation, as if its goal and purpose were for training and debate and nothing more. And that was not the main goal. Rather, the back and forth argumentation and the debates came about incidentally. When something to be weighed was stated, and someone interpreted it one way and another interpreted it the opposite, each one was obliged to clarify his way of learning and to prove his understanding. And the main goal was nothing but knowing what one must do and what to avoid. If our purpose had been to interpret the composition, the Mishnah Torah, by means of the Talmud, we would not have written the work. So what the Rambam is saying here in his letter to Rav Yosef ben Yehuda is that the purpose of the Talmud was not to teach pilpul, or not to teach like back and forth argumentation and logic. Everything that's contained in it, all of the details, was in order to teach one what one must do. Basically, to teach you the final halacha. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to avoid?
What's a pilpul?
A pilpul is like back and forth argumentation, like
So
logic, debate, that sort of thing.
Now, is that what he means in the first paragraph we read? Is that what he means by rabbinical style, or is that another point more he's trying to make?
Yes, that is what he means by rabbinical style. That it's in the divine code, it's frequently bringing forth an opinion, like it brings forth the halacha from the Mishnah Torah, but then it brings forth differing opinions and then these other opinions, and sort of gives you sort of a back and forth argumentation rather than just telling you the halacha is this.
Huh. And so Rambam, when he wrote the Mishnah Torah, he doesn't cite all the back and forth, he just restates the law as it is without the back and forth. Is that the point?
Exactly. That was the purpose of the Mishnah Torah, was to take what had become, even in the 1100s, that long ago, the 1100s in the Common Era. It had studying Talmud and studying Mishnah and studying Tosefta and all these things had become sort of this very complicated, ocean of complexity, well beyond the common person. So he composed the Mishnah Torah to simply give you the simple final ruling, so that you didn't have to sift through and try to find it and pick out each final ruling from the discussion, but you could just have it laid out there before you.
And we talked in the last video too that when you look at the Talmud, it does not cite so it'll lay out these arguments, but it doesn't cite what the correct answer is.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of a hit and miss. Yeah, you can't just pick up the Talmud and like pull a random verse out of it and be like, this is true, it's in the Talmud, therefore it must be true. It doesn't work like that.
Right. The Talmud is not written in a Western style at all. It's not just simply a different language, but a different style. Because we have to remember that the oral law was studied in order to be retained, what they call Torah Sheba'al Peh, meaning the Torah that is on the mount. And despite how it may seem in our times now, people did then, what they still do today, have the capacity to memorize a great deal of information, given the time and the discipline to do so. And this would accompany what they already knew from the written Torah. So, the oral law being the explanations or the details of all of the commandments of Hashem. And that's the purpose of what we're trying to do here. It only seems complicated because when you're living in exile, things become increasingly difficult. You're just learning how to survive. And as Jacob pointed out, this is by the time of the Rambam, at that time it was well over 1,000 years after the temple had been destroyed and would be restored in the days. So that's where he came to a point where he saw a solution needed to be found to clarify the law again. So to be clear, Mishnah Torah is not a book of new laws, no, but rather a restatement of the oral law as it was already known, to be made available to everyone, scholar and layman alike.
It would seem that really the only purpose for recording the back and forth then is to say somebody had a discussion 500 years ago about point A. If you record that discussion, then today we don't have to have that. We can look at that discussion and see it was already addressed and concluded without having to reinvent the discussion wheel all over again. Yeah,
that is one of the main purposes of it, and the important parts of still keeping it around even today. There's also, we have to remember too that the writing style that we in the modern world kind of take for granted, which is that you pick up a book and it's intended to simply be, I will read this on my own and I will understand what it says. This is something that's developed over thousands of years. Initially, when people were writing books, like when the Mishnah was written down, when the Talmud was written, this was not a style that necessarily existed. It might have existed in like the Greek culture, but not in every culture did that same understanding exist. So books like the Mishnah and the Talmud were never intended to just be picked up by random people and read. They were intended to be something that's accompanied by direct teaching. And without that, you're kind of not really able to understand what they're trying to actually say. Or you will misinterpret them in horrible, horrible ways.
Mm-hmm. And before moving on, one more final point, and this is one of the most important things, right here at the end. And the main goal was nothing but knowing what one must do and what to avoid. As many of us who have left the church or left secularism, and then we come to find Torah, and we're learning from the Jewish people, and we're learning from their scholars, we learn from the rabbis, we come to them where they are in their time. And in their time, especially in the traditions that developed in Europe, the study of Torah became, as we have learned our own, studying under different rabbis, and also what we've learned from our own teachers, it had become increasingly abstract. Now, Torah has the purpose of increasing knowledge, the appreciation of Hashem, and increasing wisdom. But in more recent times, it has become a little more to that place of being a little more abstract and a tendency to be maybe very philosophical. And the main point of the Torah that Hashem wants from us is to practice His commandment. And perhaps you could speak more on that, Jacob.
It's true. I mean, that's, yeah.
We learn in order to do.
Exactly. That's what we learned from the sages. And to bring it back around to the Mishnah Torah. So this is part of where the Mishnah Torah stands apart as an especially important work for us, in that it sort of bridges the gap between the Talmudic and the Mishnaic way of writing style and the more modern writing style that we're used to. The Mishnah Torah is designed as a book that you can simply pick up and read, and it's understandable to the common man. You don't necessarily have to have teachings that accompany it, although that helps, especially now, like 1,000 years after it was written almost.
Well,
but it was intended to be read.
I think having only read certain portions of it, I think that's where a book like this, and so with reading the Mishnah Torah, the way it's laid out, even that, you can't straight pick it up in the section that says Noahide laws. You still need a teacher and guidance on where in the Mishnah Torah to, study the laws regarding murder and theft, which is like a huge section.
Right. It requires quite comprehensive reading, and really, the more you know of the entire work, the clearer the whole thing becomes, essentially.
Yeah. Cool. Let's go.
Okay, so let's continue. In his commentary to the above statement, Rav Yosef Kapach, of blessed memory, clarified the intent of the Rambam. This is to say that the purpose of the give and take and debates and investigations that are in the Talmud are totally finished, according to our rabbis' opinion, for they did not come about except for the need of the times, to clarify teachings from the Mishnah and unclear Preface, official teachings from the early ordained rabbis that were not included in the Mishnah teachings, and even unclarified rationalizations. But after everything had been elucidated, there was no need to be occupied with them. And see his interpretation of the Mishnah in Nazir, chapter 2, Mishnah 1. Since the teachings of Rabbi Yehuda are in the name of the school of Shammai, and the teachings of the school of Shammai were rejected, we do not care what they said. So he's just basically clarifying what the Rambam says, which is that with a work like the Mishnah Torah, if you essentially have the final rulings and you can learn them from there, there's not necessarily a need to delve into the Talmud to try to re-extract them. They've already been extracted and elucidated plainly in the pages of the Mishnah Torah. And this is especially important for us Noahides. Now, here's the thing. A lot of Jews, and in a lot of communities, they'll tell you, look, we don't paskin by the Mishnah Torah. We don't make halachic rulings according to what the Mishnah Torah says. So this, the Rambam said this, but we go by the Rif, or we go by, the Rosh, or whatever else. So for Noahides, this is kind of less of an issue, because ultimately the halacha for Bnei Noach has basically been brought together in only one halachic work. There's only one compendium of Jewish law in which the Noahide laws are brought together and elucidated in all their details. And it's the Mishnah Torah. There's literally, I mean, you can say, well, not everyone paskins by the Mishnah Torah, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, there's really no other game in town. If you want to learn the details of the halacha, of the 7 laws of Noah, that's where you have to go.
Well, and I think it's important to note too that even when people say they paskin by something else, that they should still end up with the same conclusion that the Rambam ended up at, because they're all sourcing their halakha from the same source.
Yeah, ultimately. There's a lot of things, like there's, some people paskin by the Shulchan Aruch and some people by other things, but like the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Torah, they do not differ on a lot. It's a very small number of things that they diverge on.
So who is Rav Kappa? And why, well, so for people who don't know who he is, why is it important that he says this as opposed to, Abby on the internet?
Andrew?
Oh, Rav Yosef Kappa, he was formerly, if I'm not mistaken, formerly the chief rabbi of the Yemenite community in Israel. And he was descended from a long line of Torah scholars in Yemen. Now, in addition to this, Rav Kappa of Blessed, he was known for actually bringing together a lot of sources, original manuscripts for the Mishnah Torah. Because even as time went on, there were some changes, mainly copyist errors, mainly for the editions that went to Europe. However, in some communities, especially in Iman, in Yemen, they were very faithful in keeping a lot of the original manuscripts of the Mishnah Torah, especially where Gentiles are mentioned quite frequently. So, Rav Kappa brought together a lot of these sources and spent his life doing this to keep this all together and have the textual integrity. And in fact, our own teachers did have the merit to study directly under Rav Kappa for a time. And actually, this is actually continued for anyone who's interested. If anyone wants to see what is really the most up-to-date or complete text of Mishnah Torah in the original Hebrew, with the original manuscript to a site run by one of our teachers called Nachon Mamre. And perhaps after the video would be flashed from the screen there, but that's the name of the site, Nachon Mamre, MECHON hyphen MAMRE.com. But anyway, so Rav Kappa, sorry, I trailed out too far there. Again, he was a very important leader in the Yemenite community and giving them a real voice as Israel was still growing. And in his work, not only just preserving works of Rambam, but you could say making this more available, raising its importance to the rest of the Torah world, and thereby even to the rest of the world for those like us who are trying to learn Torah.
I think it's important to note that the Yemenite community basically has always paskined from the Mishnah Torah, basically. They've used that as their guide to the halacha over the ages, from the time of Rambam until today.
Not just them, but the entire Middle Eastern Jewry.
Largely, yeah. There's a lot of, there's more than just the Yemenite communities that have been.
It was a large part of the Jewish world that.
Yeah.
Right.
And Rav Kappa is also very well known for a very thorough commentary he wrote on the Mishnah Torah, going through and explaining a lot of sections of it.
What's it called?
Rav Kappa's commentary to the Mishnah Torah.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't have it on the shelf back there?
I do. It's just the Mishnah Torah, and at the bottom it has Rav Kappa's commentary.
All right.
But again, the reason that our own teacher, Rabbi Baron, Noahide Israel, that he brought this forth himself as someone who goes according to the Yemenite tradition, largely because of its faithfulness to halachic tradition and the means by which Torah judgments are paskined. And it really take another lesson to explain, how the Torah world, how it's developed only maybe in the past 200 years, is different, not radically different, because they still adhere to the covenant and the core tenets of the faith in Jewish culture, etc. But some of those things have changed as a Western Jewry, Anglo-European Jewry has grown, and they have their particular perspective, as opposed to their Sephardic and Middle Eastern brethren, the way they learn Torah. But really, I'll just add my own opinion. As time goes on, and the world is coming together, and as Jews who were separated for eons are coming back together, in my opinion, even with the disagreements that continue, all Torah knowledge, I think, is really being reunited, slowly but surely, until
and ultimately that's where we'll go. There'll be a Sanhedrin, and the entire Jewish world will be reunited once again. May that happen soon.
That's what Hashem said. Okay.
Okay, continuing on then. Mishnah Torah is the only comprehensively written system of authentic Talmudic Noahide law. Until a true Sanhedrin is restored in Israel, Noahide scholars require a guide that works within that system with perfect consistency. This alone can enable Noahides to make decisive legal decisions with confidence. This purist approach to Mishnah Torah was hailed and defended by the famed author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, who says, response, who is he whose heart conspires to approach forcing congregations who practice according to the Rambam of blessed memory to go by any one of the early or latter-day Torah authorities? Is it not a case of a fortiori that regarding the school of Shammai, that the halacha does not go according to them, that the Talmudic sages said, if one practices like the school of Shammai, he may do so, but according to their leniencies and their stringencies. The Rambam is the greatest of all the Torah authorities, and all the communities of the land of Israel, and the Arab-controlled lands, and the West, North Africa, practice according to his word, and accepted him upon themselves as their chief rabbi. Whoever practices according to him, with his leniencies and his stringencies, why coerce them to budge from him? So this is in the words of Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. So he's saying that, look, if a community decides they want to go by the Mishnah Torah and paskin according to the Rambam, then they should not be coerced into not doing that. They should be allowed to do so.
This reminds me of the whole the modern day discussion about taking on, if you're gonna convert or do something, you do it according to Ashkenazi, you're doing it to Sephardi. This must have been kind of the same discussion back then.
Yeah, basically. Different communities with different ways of doing things, different minhagim, different practices. And even back in the days of when Yisrael was in their land, there was divergence of practice, within allowed bounds, even among the tribes themselves, which was respected.
So I want to talk about this word where he says Noahide scholars. And I think we touched on this a little bit in one of the earlier videos, but in that first paragraph. So right now there aren't very many Noahide scholars. There's certainly not any, programs similar to like a yeshiva or ordination of any sort. We kind of talked about that before. But what, and I know you guys, we all study with more Mikhail, but what is the idea here about a Noahide scholar? Can read a book, this book, and become a scholar, and then you read till page 164 and now you're a scholar? How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. Once you finish this book, blam, that's it. You're a scholar. Your papers will come in the mail. No, I'm kidding. No, it's what do they say? The crown of Torah is available to all. They must simply come and take it. Something along those lines.
Yeah, elucidates. When I see Noahide scholars here, and it has some comparison with Torah scholars, it brings to mind a term that exists, and is actually a legal term, it's certainly among Jews, Talmid Chachamim, which means a student of the sages. So, someone who is a student of the sages, okay, is actually learning from others who have acquired more knowledge and learned from experience as well. I mean, certainly in our times, there's free inquiry, and it's something that's very prized, and it is a great blessing, but we must also learn from others. There's, of course, what Hashem says in His Word, and then there's also the wise who have inherited the tradition of learning, going all the way back to Moshe at Sinai. So, if we act as scholars, one, of course, is reading, right? And that's for gaining the knowledge, the intellectual development. At the same time, and again, I'm elaborating on how I'm reading this term, Noahide scholar. This is how I'm seeing it. There is the reading and studying, but there is also, of course, the practice of Hashem's commandments, as we mentioned, as well as trying to improve our own character. Because really, that is part of what it is to be, I would say, to be a truly just person, one who acquires wisdom.
Yeah, and I think too, having been in the Jewish world or in Torah world for a while, I think what I found is that the base level of basically every human being should be to be a scholar. And from there you can go up to, like, more wisdom, more piety, but your base, because it says in the next thing, so we're able to do decisive legal decisions. And I know, like I said before, from personal experience, I've had that issue because I'm not a scholar and I don't know the halakha. So even like making decisions about what to do in a particular instance becomes difficult because of that lack of knowledge. I'll give you an example. Here's a story time. One time I was at work. Maybe I've told this story before in a previous episode.
Yeah.
About the vending machine. Did I tell that story before? Okay, then I'm right.
It's a good story.
Well, there's an incident with the milk in the refrigerator at work, but I won't bore you. But yeah,
that's the thing. We exist in a world where basically everyone is an ignoramus regarding Torah knowledge. And
regarding halakha and how to live by it.
Right. There's in an ideal world, we would grow up being taught halakha and Torah. And by the time we're like 13, 14, maybe like around 18 or so, we would know halakha backwards and forwards and inside out, and then just live our lives. And that wouldn't be considered being a great Torah scholar. That would be considered, your obligations.
That would be considered basic.
That would be considered, that's the base level of knowledge everyone is expected to achieve. The problem is, in this day and age, achieving that level of knowledge is like up here. That's like a huge accomplishment. So, that's just the reality in which we live today. And we'll get to the point, as humanity, where that comes back down to being a normal level of knowledge. And then people will be able to, some people will be like, yeah, I know what's required of me. That's good enough. And Baruch Hashem, I can live my life. I can grow close to Hashem. And that's really all I need. And that's fine. And then other people will be like, I want to delve deeper. I want to be a great, hacham, and they can like go and go further and further and become great Torah scholars. But that's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. But we do all have a requirement to know what God requires of us so that we can do it.
Why do we say cup of tea? I mean, we're in America. Why can't we say that's not my cup of coffee? Just saying.
True.
Tea is more delicious.
Or that's not my favorite soup. Yeah.
It's not whatever. Okay. You know what? Audience, please forgive me. It's really a simple way of saying Noahide scholars. Okay. I tends to be out here sometimes. It's really someone who knows the law. And that simply is. Someone who knows his obligations, okay? And here's one way to explain this, by way of the halakha itself, which Rambam lays out in all the Torah study. And this is really how Torah is learned in this way, comprising of 3 parts. One is a study, when a person has a study time, dividing into 3. 1, studying the written Torah, and secondly, studying the oral Torah, which is what we're discussing here. And what's the third part? The third part is making the connections between what you find in the halakha and what you find in the Tanakh. Not just the sources of the commandments themselves, but where you see halakha, actually halakhic situations played out, both in the Torah and in the Tanakh. And those connections that are made, you find the truths, the underlying truths and principles between them. That is what Rambam called Gemara. He wasn't referring to the Gemara that we know as Talmud, but Gemara being the process of that study and making those connections between the two, between the written law and the oral law. That is what is defined as Talmud Torah, studying Torah. And you see people, even we, do not have all the same obligations as Israel, right? They have 613 commandments, and when we think to ourselves, well, 7 laws, that seems simple. As we go forth, okay, some laws are very broad, and as life goes, it can be very complex. And it is important that we see, okay, well, what is God giving us to start with? Right? Just His commandments and also the halakha surrounding them. We make those connections when we study them. Make those connections between. That is what makes us scholar.
It's true, as we will see when we actually get into the meat of this book.
And part of being a scholar is not just knowing, it's also doing. So like when you walk down the street and you see a penny on the side of the road, you know exactly what Hashem requires of you to do with that penny. Do you put it in your pocket? Do you find the owner? That's what the halakha teaches us to do.
Indeed.
Most of us just guess or go with what our current tradition in our society is, and for me that's not good enough personally, but okay, carry on.
Okay. So continuing on with the next section, the authentic Rambam approach of this work. A code of the 7 laws based on Mishnah Torah deserves to be taught strictly according to the will and true Torah outlook of its author. Therefore, with sincere, deep respect for greater scholars who have preceded me in this holy work, trusting in the Eternal One, whose Torah even wisens the simpleton, Psalms 19:8, I girded my loins to create a simple, unencumbered, yet as complete as possible, a guide for Noahides, rooted exclusively in Mishnah Torah and Bible. I cite no differences of opinion, because they detract from the goal, to put all the laws of the Noahide covenant into the capable hands of God-fearing Noahide scholars. What I do cite, as much as possible, are the Hebrew sources for every law and teaching in the book, in the text. The goal is to give the inexperienced reader direct access to the study of the Hebrew sources, which were previously closed to him, to prove my position to the experienced scholar. I strive for a balance between presenting the laws in a format that is digestible, including explanations of the awesome logic behind the laws, while remaining unapologetically true to the literal meaning of the text. Beyond explaining the nuances of the law, I reveal to the reader the awesome logic, deep morality, and fairness of the Noahide laws, with pithy responses to the attacks of fearmongers and anti-Semites. In the third section, listing and explaining core universal Torah values from the Bible which directly involve and relate to Noahides, I strive to reveal the great depth and the lofty moral instruction not readily apparent in various biblical stories, while remaining as concise and free from burdensome philosophy as possible. Okay, so here he lays out his goals for the book, basically to lay out before the Noahide who truly wants to learn his Shira Mitzvot, the basic details of the 7 laws. And I know from our learning from Mori Barra, the goal of his book really is not to give you necessarily everything you could possibly need to know about the 7 laws gathered together in one book, but rather to give you a broad overview of the entire 7 laws, so that in reading this, you basically have the skeleton laid out before you, or the basic framework of how everything fits together. And then, for those who want to know more and to really delve into the various details of the 7 laws, you can go out and begin to study the Mishnah Torah to really understand, all of the details of the halakha. And learn from a teacher, of course, as well.
So on that note, one of the things he did, which I think was very important, is as he goes through your book and lays out all the halakha and everything, he cites his source in the Mishnah Torah. And on top of that, he created an index in the back of the book of everywhere he's cited from.
Yeah.
So as we read, we'll see how that kind of works. But I think that's very important, because then you can check the source yourself. You can delve into it directly in the Mishnah Torah and learn that way. And
the Tanakh itself, where there are good sources for that. And
then to relating back to what you said previously, he and I think for me this was important, is that it doesn't get confused with various opinions about this person said so and so and this person said so and so, but we ended up deciding that, which is kind of what he was saying before, which is that let's just get straight to the point of what we're obligated to do.
Okay, for the sake of brevity, we're going to skip the notes talking about changes to the 2nd edition book, and we're going to jump ahead to our disclaimer, where it says, continuing on page VIII in the book, or Roman numeral 8, our disclaimer. My hope and prayer are that the work succeeds in conveying how the Noahide laws, as learned directly according to the clear, simple understanding of the written Torah, and the chief, most complete and authoritative source of the oral Torah, the Mishnah Torah, remain as timely and essential today as they ever did in the distant past. It must be emphasized that even with this 2nd edition Guide for the Noahide is still a work in progress, as we aspire to create a complete Mishnah Torah for the Noahide. As much as we toiled to produce as flawless and clear a guide as possible, places for improvement will continue to be discovered, warranting a future edition. If any error should be found purely on the basis of Bible, Mishnah Torah, objective fact, proper grammar, or there is a problem of clarity, kindly report the problem to the author by email at torathmoshe@gmail.com. Lastly, as comprehensive as we tried to make this guide, it was not meant to take the place of a competent rabbi or Torah scholar in the field of Noahide law. In case of a doubt, a competent Torah teacher should be consulted. A sign of the times. Perhaps these are the times that the Rambam referred to in his precious letter to his foremost student, Rav Yosef ben Harav Yehuda, the era for which the Mishnah Torah, the legal foundation of this guide, was written. And all that I've described to you regarding who won't accept it, the Mishnah Torah, properly, that is only in my generation. However, in future generations, when jealousy and the lust for power will disappear, all of Israel will subsist, literally will be satiated on it alone, and will abandon all else besides it, without a doubt, except for those who seek something to be involved with all their lives, even though it doesn't achieve a purpose. Perhaps these are the times to which Rabbi Nachman of Breslev referred, when he wrote, even though in the future, when any halacha will need to be known, they will open and delve into the Rambam. Even so, however, the book Guide for the Perplexed and the philosophical works he composed are forbidden to pursue. In Siyah Sarfei Kodesh.
Peruse.
May we live to see the day in our lifetime when, as Yirmiyahu foretold, the whole law in its purity will be written on the hearts of the Jewish people, that is, known perfectly by heart, as it is written, but this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Hashem. I will put my law in their inward parts, and in their heart will I write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. This will serve as a shining light and example to a non-Jewish world restored to the Noahide covenant. Mori Michael Shalomo Baran. Cool.
Very
So
good.
there you are.
And for anyone who is interested, if you find interest in what we're doing here, you may find more interest by joining our class taught by Rabbi Baron each Saturday. It's after Shabbat in Israel, and we're still daylight here. And we'll make that available here on the link. You can sign up at torahmoshe.com, and if you like to sign up for classes, it would be good also.
Indeed.
Wasn't it the prophet Jeremiah that told some of the Jews to go down to Yemen? Or was that?
There is a legend about that among the Jews of Iman, that shortly before the Babylonian Empire overran Jerusalem, overran Yerushalayim, it said that the prophet said to them that if they wanted to keep all the traditions of the Torah, then they should go south. And they did, far down to the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. And this was actually about 2,500 years ago. Yes, that's the legend known among them. And this should also be worthwhile too, that a rabbi had quoted this particular statement from the prophet, because oftentimes this is used by Christians to try to say, well, this is referring to the new covenant that we were all lied to about. Okay, the covenant to which he is referring here is nothing that replaces the Torah of Moshe, but rather it's like a reconciliation, which is occurring even right now, both Israel and us from among the nations, returning to the true path of faith in Hashem, the one God.
Sure.
All right.
And what he's pointing out too is that the traditional way of understanding this is not that there's some mystical inscription of the Torah on everyone's heart, like mystically it exists in my heart, it dwells there, but rather it's like they learn it by heart. They literally know it right off the top of their head perfectly. It's inside them, in their heart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, should we wrap up here then? Any last words besides that, or should we just?
I look forward next week to getting into part 1 of the book on
Yes.
the Noahide covenant itself.
Finally.
Yes.
Yes. We appreciate everyone hanging with us here, and we look forward to reading next week and wishing everyone wonderful and a blessed week, much success.
Yes.
With the help
Okay.
of God.
So that concludes our study time. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. And again, if you have any questions or comments about anything we read or studied in tonight's in this video, please write them in the video comment section, and we'll continue discussion offline. We'll see you in the next episode.